my job as the president really is like to be the chief listener as well. That has been something I have tried over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years to develop. So listening to our team members, listening to our clients, listening to the industry at large, and ask ourselves, like, what are people saying? Where are our clients wanting to go? Where does this team member want to take their career? Listening and then charting that course. That's really probably more of the president's side is the listener.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going really well and fantastically. Josh, how are you?
So not only is it fantastically, you use the adverb again this time, but also really well. So good to know that you're having that great of a day. I'm doing really well. Why is your day going so great?
Well, it's actually been a pretty busy day, so it's good to do all this work, but we got a pretty cool guest today. So that has taken my day to the next level.
We absolutely 100,000% do. Before we get to that though, question for you.
Sure.
Over the years that we've been hosting this podcast, we occasionally, I think some while recording, some maybe while not recording, we'll kind of banter a little bit and kind of talk about maybe some less than realistic ways that attractions can kind of come together and mash up. What do you think has been kind of one of the most ridiculous ideas we've come up with?
Well, I think it has to do with axe throwing.
I think they all have to do with axe throwing.
I think that's the one that like when we talk about, go-karts and axe throwing, or, like a haunted, hayride, underwater axe throwing or something. Like axe throwing seems to be included in all of those, I think, just because of its dangerous nature. So I don't know that I can pick a specific one, but that's one of the elements I think that comes up most.
So now I'm thinking like haunted children's show, but actually haunted.
But actually haunted, yes.
Actually haunted, yes.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah. So it's fun to come up with those ideas that are less than realistic. And then what can be even more fun too is actually to tie in some realism to it to see something come to fruition. And we're going to actually talk about that today with our guest, Mark Stepanian, who's the President and Chief Experience Officer of CAVU Designworks. And the innovative strategy that he takes, that his team takes, has come up with some unbelievable experiences for rides and attractions. And it just reminded me of some of these just fun, I would say, lighthearted conversations that we've had. But he goes into a deep dive of how they actually innovate and come up with some pretty ridiculous and awesome ideas.
Well, they have the challenge of actually making a physical thing that works, right? We don't have that challenge or opportunity,
that responsibility, right?
Responsibility or anything. But for people that work with him and in that space, being engineers and being designers and being creative folks, that's what they thrive on, right? Taking these different ideas and mashing them together and seeing what can we do versus what we can't do. And, you mentioned his title, Chief Experience Officer, which, you and I talked a little bit about that. We're starting to see that a little bit more in different places. And I really like how Mark talks about it's a lot about the guest experience, of course, are what we doing serving the guest experience, but also he talks about it from the employee experience realm, where it's not enough to just talk about the guest experience, but if your employees aren't being listened to and your employees aren't feeling like they have value, then you're not going to produce the best guest experience that you can produce.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And when he talks about his team and the way that they come up with ways that can create a phenomenal guest experience, talking about really balancing the way that the team is structured, particularly when he talks about the innovation aspect of it. That many of them come from the industry and are able to understand kind of the ins and outs, while many of them also come from outside the industry as well. And they're able to balance and really come up with phenomenal ideas that previously we haven't seen in the industry because it's being heavily influenced by those outside and then kind of balanced out with those who are within the business as well.
So I think you just said balance like 3 times. So should we balance this episode and get right to Mark's interview?
We absolutely should. Here is this phenomenal interview with Mark Stepanian from CAVU.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Yeah, hey Matt, happy to be here with you guys.
We are so excited to jump into this conversation. First of all, Mark, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and CAVU?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Mark Stepanian. I am the President and CXO, Chief Experience Officer here at CAVU. So start to kind of tell our story a little bit just in titles. We are an experience engineering company. And so it's funny, such a simple question sometimes can be hard to answer, like, who are you? Through the pandemic, we actually took some time to kind of like step back and ask ourselves, like, who are we? Like, what do we want to be here at CAVU? And so we worked with a branding agency to figure that out. But yeah, we landed on experience engineers, sort of like a play on words. We want to engineer the experience, but also be engineers of experiences. And so, yeah, really excited.
Can you expand a little then on the title of CXO, Chief Experience Officer? I feel like it's something that I see popping up more and more nowadays within various different types of firms of, or kind of suppliers, operators, hospitality and attractions, kind of all over.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a relatively new title. Can you unpack that a little bit? What does the CXO mean?
Yeah. So for us, like I said, when we boiled down who we are as a brand, our sort of guiding principle is, does it serve the guest experience? Does what we're doing, whether it's an actual attraction we're developing or whatever, does it serve the guest experience? And so for me, as the president and chief executive leading the company, that's my job, is to always ask our team, is what we're doing serving the guest experience? And so that's why for us, it was important to sort of showcase that in a title. One, it generates like a ton of interest when I introduce myself to clients and stuff. They say, CXO, what is that? Because you're right, it's new, but it really is meaningful to us. I'm not trying to just lead this company. I'm trying to lead the company and always ask, are we serving the guest experience?
And so, Mark, I would imagine that being the president, you're also serving the employee experience as well. So can you talk a little bit about how that ties in?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, my job as the president really is like to be the chief listener as well. That has been something I have tried over the last, 2 or 3 years to develop. So listening to our team members, listening to our clients, listening to the industry at large, and ask ourselves, like, what are people saying? Where are our clients wanting to go? Where does this team member want to take their career? Listening and then charting that course. That's really probably more of the president's side is the listener. Yeah.
So throughout all this listening, I'd love to go into a little further. What are you hearing? Where do you see, I know that's probably a really broad question as well, but as far as some of the things just over the last couple of years, as we know, there's been a lot of changes to all aspects of the industry, to the guest experience, to everything in general. I would say, what are the things that are very much top of mind right now as maybe the biggest priorities you have on your plate with CAVU?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we are seeing a sort of a pretty marked shift in the way that stories are being told. So, traditionally on attractions, you have a very sort of like predictable and linear storytelling experience. And on some cases, it's way more obvious than other. Like you're in a dark ride and the producer or show set designer like points the whole ride vehicle to the show set. And it's like, hey, look at this thing over here. And like, let me tell you this story. And what we are starting to see is an interest from, not just our industry, but like entertainment experiences across the board that are pushing that storytelling to be a little bit more nonlinear, a little bit more agency driven. So giving guests some sort of like role in the experience themselves, and taking that to the next level with new technologies like AR and VR, and so that's where we're kind of seeing the industry at large from like a big picture perspective. I think just given where we are right now in a global sense, the industry pulse that I'm seeing just based on IAPA and ASTM and all these different events is the industry is still a bit tenuous to figure out like what does the next couple of years look like, because we have an enormous demand right now. Like people have been kind of cooped up for a while, and we're seeing like parks are doing record business and per caps are up at parks, and so a lot of the folks we're talking to, a lot of the clients we're talking to are saying like, our parks are good right now. Like we are good right now. We don't necessarily need to be back in those like early 2000 days where it's like coaster, like just putting out coasters every year to drive people through that gate. Like people intrinsically want to be in our spaces just because they haven't been for so long. And so we're kind of seeing just a little bit of tenuousness on taking that next step for like those next big marquee sort of projects. So we're in a little bit of a waiting period right now.
I would imagine though, for someone who engineers experiences, that's pretty exciting though, thinking about, when parks do start to kind of develop and put those capital improvements in to, start bringing people back when it's not just post-pandemic pent up demand, right? But it's, it's kind of reinventing themselves, even that storytelling, that nonlinear storytelling can be very exciting. But I would imagine from a technology standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, also kind of daunting, because how do you predict what thousands of people, how they may view themselves in that story? Like you said, it's easy to point a vehicle at a screen and know that that's the next step of the story. But then how do you kind of think through it non-linearly?
Yeah. So you brought up a really good point, because we've been struggling with this recently as a lot of parks are really data driven, right? So like they make decisions based on data on like, if the people do this ride, they take a survey, they said it was great, we loved it. They have all these survey results, and that really then drives decision making moving forward. For us, it's hard because, for example, one of our new products is this Quest sort of walk through much higher agency, not screen-based experience. And when we pitch this, a lot of our clients are like, do you have any data on this? Like, are people going to like this? How are people going to deal with this situation? And it's a really good point. Like, there's not a ton of data for these like newer, I would consider them like next generation attractions. And so one of the things we're starting to increasingly do is do like full scale mockups or a demo where we're building a few different, we call them modules for Quest. We build a few different of these modules and actually allow people to come and experience them because they've never done that type of experience before. And so that has been one way that we're trying to get people over that sort of, I've never done this, is it actually going to be cool sort of hump.
Yeah.
That's cool. Can you actually expand a little on that full scale mock-up? I guess what's the difference between building a mock-up and building the ride itself in a test environment, as far as making sure you're making the right investment in terms of you want the user to be able to have the full immersive experience with it, but I guess you don't want to inadvertently kind of build it out entirely if we're doing this to seek feedback, and that feedback might result in several significant changes.
Yeah, another really important challenge we have. We anytime we do mock-ups, we always try to ask ourselves, like, what leaps do we think a client or somebody who's experienced this can make? So for example, we have modules where like you're pulling levers to solve puzzles, and in reality the final goal may be when you pull the lever and you solve the puzzle, there's this big gag that happens, whether there's a smoke effect or there's something that happens the room. But we may not be able to create that moment in a mock-up space like we would in real life, because maybe the ceiling's not as high as we want it to be, or whatever is. But we can at least, once they pull and have that moment, we simulate then the big moment with some mock-up sort of response, and then allow the client or whoever we're trying to sell to sort of make that logic leap themselves to say, okay, I get it. Instead of when I pull this thing, that happens, this much bigger thing is going to happen. And so we just try to figure out what can we simulate, but what is so core to the experience that it needs to be present even in a mock-up, if that makes
Mark,
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious though, like it takes special people to kind of come up with these things, right? And certain mindsets and creativity. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are to be able to play with these things and create these environments?
Yeah. So I started at Kennywood, and actually one of the probably biggest things any young professional I talk to who asks me, I'm excited, I want to get in the industry, what should I do? My first answer is go work at a park. One, it's easy. Every single park in like the world is hiring right now. And so you should be able to find a job at a park. And a lot of people say, yeah, but it's like a summer job, like it's not important. For me, when I worked at Kennywood, they were gracious enough to allow me to do maintenance in the morning. So I spent like the first 6 hours of every day maintaining a roller coaster and a water ride and a dark ride. And then in the afternoon, I floated around all of the different departments. So I spent like some weeks in operations and some weeks in games and weeks in food and beverage. And I really got to see not only how does the equipment that now I'm producing, how do guests use that? How does the park staff, like operators, use it? How does the maintenance team use it? But I also got to see like how park guests use that equipment. And for me, then that has really driven all of our decision making when we're designing an experience, leveraging that past experience to say, okay, when I was at Kennywood, we saw all of these things. So we probably need to make sure there's a maintenance access for that panel. Otherwise, maintenance is going to take 3 times as long and it's not going to get done. And so for me, I think the start of the innovation process is always grounded in reality to say, how are the end users, both the park people and also our guests, how are they going to use this equipment, and how are they going to use these mechanisms that create this experience, and then how do we design for that, if that makes sense? Yeah.
When you say use this equipment, can you expand a little bit on that? Is this a guest pulling a lap bar down on the ride? Is it just the way that they're interacting with the park? What are the examples of that phrase, use the equipment?
Yeah, I think it's anything. I mean, when we are designing a flying theater, for example, yeah, it could be like a seatbelt. And one of the decisions we made on our early models was like, guests don't really love seatbelts. They can be tricky to use. You've got to put your hands in places that you may not want to put your hand. Like there's just a lot of complexities with using a seatbelt. And so we asked ourselves, if I'm a guest, what do I want to do? I just want to pull this thing down and it's done and it's over with. And so, and the same from an operator's perspective, like having to go around and tugging on seatbelts is cumbersome. And so we've said, okay, how can we streamline? How can we optimize the experience of that operator to make this a better, faster loading time, all this stuff. And so we are constantly asking every single touch point, whether it's like a physical touch point or a digital touch point that maybe the guest never even sees, how do we optimize that for interfaces with guests and operators and park people?
So Mark, that kind of brings up a question for me that, there's some people that say, well, what we've done in the past works, right? You know, we've got a lap bar with a little handle and people can pull up on that. That works just fine. So why do we need to spend the time and the money and the effort to innovate something different when this is working just fine? So I guess that's part of the experience that you're trying to sell.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is, so we've had a number of clients when we start our innovation process, we don't typically offer products. We go to a client and say, what are the emotions that you're trying to get your guests to feel? Like, what are those feelings, those sensations? Maybe it's physical, maybe it's, like I said, emotionally, but what are you trying to elicit? What is that response that you're trying to get out of this experience? I mean, humans are complex, right? So we have way more than just like fear of heights or like thrill of speed. Like there's a lot more to experiences than that. And so for us, we always start with, okay, what are the feelings that you're trying to elicit in your guests? And then what are the mechanisms that allow us to generate those feelings? Like I said, whether it's like some clients say, we really want to get this physical sensation of flight. Okay, great. Then that might mean that we need a more robust actuation system, probably a 6-stop system, whatever. Some clients are saying we really want to elicit this like sense of mystery and the like emotional excitement of exploration. And so then we think about, okay, how can we sort of like shield off certain parts of this? How do we block sight lines to give guests this like sense of wonder? Maybe that's through fog, or maybe that's through light, you know, reorganizing the way we set up the lighting. But we are always asking ourselves first, feelings first, and then we select equipment based on that. Going back to the flying theater example, we've had clients who come to us and say, we understand the operational efficiencies of a lap bar, but for us, we want guests to not feel like they're on a ride. Like, because innately, when you put like a lap bar down, you're like, okay, I'm on a ride, because in normal life, you don't wear lap bars, just doing things. And so for that client, the feeling of organicness and the feeling of not being on a ride actually outweighed the operational efficiencies. And so we said, ditch the lap bar. Let's go with a seatbelt, something that's less intrusive. It's more organic. Yeah, it's going to take you longer. You might need an extra operator or two on that platform to load, but it evokes that feeling in guests that I'm not on a ride. And so for us, we never try to push like products. It's all about, like I said, feelings. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And with, I would say, you talked a little bit of the innovation and kind of a glimpse into the innovative process and of determining what feeling the client is trying to elicit from their guests. There's a lot of ways to, I would say, push boundaries for new attraction development that CAVU is certainly on top of. On the flip side of that, there's also, I would say, almost this nostalgia that attractions bring and perhaps maintaining legacies of the past. How do you, I would say, balance those two of, here's all of this amazing new technology, but there is at its core the feeling that people get when they are on a ride, and making sure that that's preserved and I would say the nostalgia maintains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so when we were rebranding over the pandemic, that was one of the things is, we're a really young company. I think our average age at this point across all of our teams in Asia and in North America and Canada and here in the US, I think our average age is 33, 35. Like, we are an extremely young company. And one of the things we were so excited about was what we call new blood. So like, we're bringing this new, innovative, passionate blood to the industry. But one of the things the brander also sort of observed, Josh, is the exact thing you just mentioned, which is this idea of like our industry is built on these like nostalgic, like, World's Fair, like fairs and like those sorts of like moments. And so when we restructured our innovation team, which is, we have a team inside CAVU dedicated to innovation. It's basically our sales team, but we've called ourselves this innovation team. I lead that team. We have about half of those folks who are industry nuts, basically, coaster people, Disney people, like people who love this industry, grew up in this industry, worked in this industry since they were 10 or whatever. That's my side of the story as well. Like I've wanted to do this since I was, 8 years old, and rode Jackrabbit at Kennywood for the first time because I thought that was crazy. But then the other half of the innovation team is fresh, like never worked in this industry at all, ever. And if you said, hey, what about that roller coaster? That's the most famous roller coaster in the world right now. I don't know, whatever that is. They would say, oh yeah, I think I saw an article about it or something. Is it a wooden or is it like they would have no clue. And we've done that strategically, to your point, Josh, to balance those two sides. So we've got people who are used to the industry box. They know what works. They know what has resonated with folks, and they know how those things are done. And then we've got a whole set, mostly younger folks who have never built an attraction before or aren't used to building attractions. And so when we say we want to generate the feeling of X, the box people say, well, we've done that before with the drop track or a drop tower or something. And then you've got the folks who have never done it before say, well, wait a second, why do we even need to do that? Why can't we do it? And the box isn't even there. And so there's no box to like sort of think in. And then what generally happens is there's some mash up that happens where we take this old school reverence, this new school, like truly out of the box, like no regards to anything, and we come up with this ultimate solution. And so that has been for us a working approach for how we balance new tech, new innovations, new technologies with sort of proven stuff.
That's really cool. I love that approach of kind of, you've got the industry box, but then you've got the people who are going to blow that box out of the water and ask those really important questions. And by the way, love Jackrabbit. That double down is just amazing. But you talk about the young folks in the industry, and I know you do a lot of work with young professionals as Josh does. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how important that is to develop the young professionals in our industry?
Yeah. I mean, so I was just at ASTM a few weeks ago and was talking to different individuals, and my big push for young professionals is truly this existential push, because we as an industry are getting older. A lot of the same folks who sort of were part of the renaissance of the amusement industry back in the 60s and 70s were working in their 20s during that time period are either to the point or past the point of retiring. And so we have this hole right now of we've got these folks who are at the last sort of parts of their career who are getting ready to hop out. And then there's a big hole before people at the younger part, people who are just entering their career. And if we as an industry want to carry on our legacy of safety, of amazing experiences and escapism and all of the things that people visit our parks and resorts and just even experience, zoos, whatever. In order for us to carry on that legacy, we need all of these young people, because they're going to be the ones to drive this industry forward for the next 50 years and continue to build on that legacy that everybody has already built. And so for me, it's not about, am I worried about, are these, students or are these young people going to change what we're doing or break what we're doing? Of course not. Like, they're the ones who need to guide us through the next 50 years. And so allowing these folks to get involved and learn and be a part, like be a real part, like not just a token, oh, there's this young person and she's involved just because we need somebody to be young, like a real impactful role within organizations, and get that experience. So whenever the time comes that, whoever's 65 right now and they're going to leave in 3 years or 5 years, we've got the people in place who are ready to carry that torch. That's, to me, what young professionals is about.
Well said. Thanks so much for sharing that. And to kind of go back a little bit to talk about your team and kind of the innovation team being half those who have came from the industry and know the ins and outs of it, and then the other half of those coming outside the industry. Well, first, what's cool about that is that in and of itself brings new blood into the industry that then feeds everything that you just talked about right there.
Yeah.
How do you find those individuals? If you're looking specifically for people with experience outside of attractions to be able to bring that in, how do you drive them in? If they're not in the industry already, why would they want to join? Why do they want to come to CAVU to be part of a team, knowing that their counterparts are going to have a completely different lens that they have on purpose?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, in terms of recruiting, we do a number of things. The first is there's a couple of like close industries, like aerospace has a lot of the same things that we do. So like when we design, we're always worried about like weight. How much does this vehicle weigh? So is aerospace. We always worry about like, and timeline, and like though a couple of industries, the automotive industry sort of as well. So when we look to hire people who have experience, but may not be in the amusement industry, we kind of look, we first look at like those secondary industries, like industries that are close-ish, but not, not the entertainment industry. We also partner with, I went to Cornell, co-op there. And so we've established a relationship with Cornell. A bunch of our team are Penn Staters, and so and a lot of our folks are also in the state of Pennsylvania physically, and so we have some partnerships with those guys. So we try to recruit relatively green folks that are coming right out of university from a couple of our alumni ties, to try to get people to who have never even thought about the amusement industry as a possibility, to try to bring them in. What we found is we don't really want to rely on, a lot of companies rely on the allure of the amusement industry. It's a dream job, it's a whatever. And that's like the core tenet of why or how they recruit people. For us, that's not good enough, because dream jobs don't make people stay. What really makes people stay is, of course, you're treating them right and you're paying them right and you're valuing them correctly and all that stuff. But even beyond that, the challenges that exist within our industry are unlike a lot of other industries. Aerospace is similar, except they've got a ton of budget. Our industry doesn't have like unlimited budgets to just like innovate on, and other industries are really like much more creative and much more innovative, but they don't have the mass usership that we do. And so what we focus on is trying to tell people you're going to be challenged beyond imagine, really, in our industry. And those challenges, that's what's going to get you out of bed every day. And that's what's going to drive you. And that's what's going to want to make you kind of stay engaged. Not that dream job, it's going to be great. Like, that's not good enough for us. You're never going to get people to stay for 50 years in an industry based on it just being a dream job.
Yeah, that dream job has to have legs, right? I mean, you've got to be able to do something with that. It's one thing to say, that's my dream job. I get it. Now what? I think is the next question, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do you, like, for those folks that come from outside the industry, obviously a big driver for the three of us and many people who are listening is the industry, right?
Yeah.
And so you talk about challenge, you talk about being valued. Have there been people that have gotten into a position and they're just, this kind of engineering just isn't for me? Like this isn't a good fit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there definitely are. I mean, I think one of the big parts of our industry is we are a very a work hard, play hard industry. I mean, we do a ton of work, and whether it's Christmas Day or whatever, the parks are operating, and our product is out there operating, and so you've really got to be willing to give a lot, to be successful. And some folks don't for their life and for their goals in life, they're not like looking for that. And so for sure, we've had people, I will never forget when we opened Tempesto, when I worked at Premiere as one of their design engineers. One of the jobs I did was Tempesto at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. Amazing product, an amazing team. I loved working with the SeaWorld guys. When we opened that ride, we had a couple of engineers with us, and we're on the platform, and there's just so much excitement. First day this ride's open, And after that day, we were back at the hotel, and I said, I was just like buzzing with energy, and I thought, this is amazing. We're talking to all these people. And I looked at her and I said, what do you think? Like, and she was like, yeah, that was cool. And I'm like, this is for 4 years in the making, like 4 years in the making. I like sort of dreamed about what this day was going to be like when we open it and we get to see our first guests experiencing this stuff and learning how they like it. And she was just like, yeah, it was cool. Like, and so some people just have also just innately different drives, I think, about what they really enjoy and look forward to. So for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say, as someone who rode Tempesto in its opening season, I think I matched your enthusiasm with it. Granted, obviously, as a consumer of it, but was like, yeah. Oh, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty awesome. So, so actually, going back to kind of the attraction development conversation, and I'll add context to this to say that Matt and I often banter, whether it's on the podcast or when we're not recording, of being a little imaginative of, I guess you can call it like an attraction mashup. And I'm pretty confident that 99, if not 100% of the ideas we've come up with are completely not feasible whatsoever. Like axe throwing trampoline park, in a wave pool, like probably not going to happen anytime soon. Right. And then looking at CAVU, you have the interactive suspended coaster, competitive shooting drop tower. You can see the elements of these come together and saying, well, what if we took this and we blended it with this? And would love to know, I would say, what are the elements that go into just this successful combination of multiple different attraction experiences?
Yeah. So most of our, we're fully remote. None of us are co-locating. And so I think about 4 times ish a year, we allow the team to sort of vote on what city they want to be in. And we all co-locate for like 5 days. It's like a little mini retreat. And during those sessions, we call them blue sky sessions, because again, CAVU is aeronautically themed. And so we have these blue sky sessions, or we call them no bad ideas sessions. And during these sessions, it's like a day long. Sometimes there might be a little bit of alcohol involved, and it's just about like throwing out ideas. Like, what if we did like this plus exactly to what you just said? Like, and you are not allowed to criticize anybody's ideas. In fact, like we always try to do this like plussing exercise where somebody says a crazy idea and then you've got to plus it. You've got to say like, yeah, and then you've got to add to it and like really try to gain some like momentum behind these perceived to be bad ideas. And a lot of our mashup attractions actually came out of that, like where we were like, shooting dark ride, super popular. Drop towers, really popular. And a lot of our team loves that like free fall sensation. So somebody said, shooting dark rides and drop tower. And of course, everybody was like, in your brain, you're thinking, okay, you've got untethered like gun devices on a drop tower. Like how are we going to make that work? But it was no bad ideas. And so we were like, great idea. And so then people just started adding. And after 10 minutes, we were like, this idea has legs. Like, this is a really cool concept. And so we had about, I think maybe 30 of those sort of mashup attractions that we were really passionate and really excited about. And we started to do the engineering on them and said, let's turn these into real products. And from those, we just continued to whittle them down to the 3 products we launched as game changers. Which was, mashups of proven attractions that we know work. And the innovation is we're combining them and mashing them up, and that's making a new product type.
So Mark, I'm curious, because you mentioned that you're all remote and you only get to, would you call it co-locate, right? Every so often. And a lot of people will say, to innovate and to be creative and things like that, you got to be in the same room and you got to throw ideas around and put things on the board and things like that. So how do you manage the fact that people are remote and yet still need to come together and collaborate? I mean, there's, obviously we have the technology to do it, but it's very different when you're not in the same room, breathing the same air and feeling the same vibe. Yeah.
So I think to your point, we don't really try to push like, so you're right. We have Teams, we use Microsoft Teams every day. We've got stand-up calls, like a, game, like a software game studio would do every day. It's 2:45 p.m. East Coast time for us on the East Coast. But all of our team joins on a MS Teams call. And each day, like Mondays are all about wacky shirt Mondays. So you wear like your favorite, El Toro shirt from 10 years ago, and you kind of talk about that. Fridays are fun days where we talk about the weekends. But on those calls, we don't try to push like innovation, because you're right, it doesn't really work as well over Zoom meetings or virtual meetings. And so we just try to be really strategic with how we're connecting and what we're trying to get. If we know we need to be, group X comes to us and says we need a proposal, it's due in 3 weeks, we will on the spot make a co-location trip where we're all heading down to Orlando or all heading to wherever, and we're going to put our heads together and we're going to just hash out this system. Those are like sort of more emergency visits. We wouldn't try to do that virtually because you're right, like the technology doesn't support us there. So we use technology for things like project management and financial updates and stuff that I don't really need to like read body language, and I don't really need to like, our team doesn't need to like feed off of that positive energy. If we know we need those opportunities, let's get together in person.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really interesting about that is I think it ties into a lot of why the industry exists, and that need to be able to, I know that's a really broad statement there, of the need to actually be in person and being socially engaged with friends, families, whatever it is. And the last couple of years have challenged that, of being able to say, well, we're able to do everything remote. And what we've all learned is, yeah, there's some things we can do remote, and there's some things that we can do to an extent remote, but there are also a number of things that remote or that Zoom is not able to replace. The importance of the in-person gathering, and the example you just gave of the co-locating retreats just really proves and really justifies just the need for people to be together in some capacity. And going back to that, kind of these innovation sessions and reflecting on it. Is there anything that you wish existed that is yet to be feasible today, that maybe it will be someday in the future, but just something that maybe that the technology just isn't there yet, or just something you think that I wish we could do this, but physically we cannot?
Yeah, I think for us, it goes back to very beginning. What we're kind of seeing the industry wanting is more agency, and for me, like way more personalized experiences. Like I think when I look back at my life, not just on entertainment experiences, but like any experience in life, the most impactful or the most like meaningful to me have always been these really personal moments where I feel like, whether I'm connecting with somebody else, like a real human in real life, and they say something and we're sharing this really like personal moment, that personalness is something that I'm so excited to see what the next 10 years of entertainment experiences sort of have. Disney's doing it with Disney Plus and starting to understand who their guests are and what do their guests like and what content do they want, and then driving the guest experience to sort of optimize that based on what we know guests enjoy. And I'm excited to see, I guess to answer your question directly, I would love to like, if every person that rode the ride could like just download their likes to my ride system, and like we just then curate a ride system that is so targeted and so personalized to, I really like these things emotionally this moment, I want these things, or I need these things, and we deliver them an experience that achieves those things. I think we can get there. Like I think in the next 10 to 20 years, as we better understand our guests and what they like and what they don't like, and like I said, those like actual moment by moment differences of, at this moment in my life or at this moment right now, I'm looking for these things, and then delivering on those. That to me is the ultimate goal of what a real entertainment experience is or should be. And we'll get there, but we're not right there. We're not there just yet, I don't think.
What you're describing to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like personalization at scale, right?
Yeah.
Because you think about somebody going to Discovery Cove in Orlando, right? And it's more of an exclusive experience. You're with the dolphins, more personal one-on-one,
Yeah.
versus going to a Cedar Point where you're standing in line with thousands of people to ride a ride that, multiple people will go on at the same time. And granted, front, back, middle, you're not going to get the exact same experience, but those experiences are designed for many people at once, right?
Yeah.
To kind of get people through, and capacity is really important. So I share that outlook. I would love to see more of that personalization at scale, but I think it's almost like a lot of the places that we've designed already are designed the opposite way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. And you're right. Like there's also the technology that needs to support that endeavor. So like with Midnight Ride, our VR motorbike ride, that was the first ride that we've ever done where we gave individuals their own motion base. So like you're on your own 3 degree freedom motion base, and you have agency. If you want to go off the track, go off the track. If you want to take that jump, hit that jump. But I remember when we pitched this idea, and when we were working, Thinkwell was the designers, when we were working with Thinkwell, that was one of the first things was, well, how are we going to do this if we need to get throughput? And somebody, again, it was probably in a no bad ideas session, somebody said, what if we give everybody their own motion base? And at first everybody was like, oh, and then we say, but okay, but let's figure it out. Like if we want to deliver this, we've got to figure that out. And what we're seeing excitedly, is a lot more of that openness to, single rider vehicles, a lot of them, and sort of still getting throughput, but not willing to sacrifice that level of personalization where it's just 1 or 2 people on a motion base or on a ride vehicle, and those people can make decisions, and that impacts them and only them, not the rest of the 30 people who are riding around them.
Mm. So the interesting thing about agency and kind of this hyper personalization is it takes consistency and almost throws it out the window, in that there's going to be a unique experience that someone will experience for themselves. Ultimately, I mean, one of the biggest upsides of that is repeatability, of knowing if you do it again, it might be a little bit different. But playing devil's advocate a little bit is that if someone has too much agency, they could walk out of the experience feeling less than satisfied, or saying this did not meet my expectations. And on one hand, it's their fault, and on the other hand, we still want to make sure that whatever agency they take, that they walk out saying, like, this was a phenomenal experience. So I guess the question is almost like balancing those, and not giving just the right amount of agency in the right context to the guest, to make sure that regardless of the experience they have, it's positive and favorable.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. For back to Midnight Ride, we achieved that because we had that exact same experience. It's like, do we ever want to let guests lose? Like everybody wins in a theme park, right? Like a positive guest experience right now, the belief is everybody has to win. I think that's going to change, because I think it's realistic to believe that in the next 10 years, I think people are going to be more comfortable, like, with the maxim, like, it's about the journey, not about the destination. And I'd love for us as an industry to accept that, like, losing is okay, and not completing the like an escape room. I feel like escape rooms are like, now you're always going to get out because they give you enough clues. To me, I think part of the challenge is, like, it's okay if I lose. Like, that means I really taxed myself and I challenged myself. But so I think that will eventually change. But for the moment, what we have done is, like, a Midnight Ride, for example, we have areas of that ride that are free, total free agency. So you can go faster, you can go slower, you can take different paths, whatever. But all roads lead to critical show set points. And so you've got some agency, and then everybody who comes back together regardless. If you're lagging behind, we artificially speed your bike up so that everybody hits the zombie moment at the same time. every single time, and everybody gets that show moment. And then you can, play around a little bit, bump your friends, try to get somebody to go off the different path, and then everybody comes together for the bridge finale moment. Like, so that's how we've done it right now, where we sort of, it's almost like agency with guardrails. And so the guardrails get wider and we allow you some real agency, and then the guardrails come together, and then there's that moment where everybody's together. Again, I think what we're looking for is ways that we can work with the folks who are telling the stories, so it feels more organic than that. So it's not obvious that we're leading you back to a key story moment. So it feels like organic, like you just happened to stumble across this key story moment, but it was actually designed there the whole time. So you still feel like you're having that agency, but we're still delivering a story that's meaningful and impactful and all that stuff.
Well, and I think one of the things from my perspective, maybe as a consumer, is that when you bring those guide rails in and you bring everybody back together, that sort of, creates the moment where it's now a shared experience, right? We talk about all this hyper personalization and doing that at scale, but at the same time, if you've ever taken a Zen ride on a roller coaster where it's just you, right? There's something cool about that. But I remember when I did that on Fury at Carowinds and loved the whole experience, but I get to the brake run and it's just me doing this, and like, that was so much of a letdown, The ride was great, but then I didn't have the cheering at the end. So, I mean, maybe to me, that's cool that you do bring them back and have that shared experience.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's like also practicalities of that when we put people in VR and reality goes away. And now your child who's on the bike next to you can't see you, and they panic because they truly believe like they're in a world all by themselves and they don't know where their mom is. And oh my gosh, like what, and then there's the zombie scene, and then this kid panics. Like that happened, that happens. And so what we've tried to do to alleviate that is we've started to embody people. It's like on Midnight Ride, when you sit down, we got some cool patents where we're like measuring your fingertips, and we're measuring the width of your palm, and we're measuring so we measure because we've got a sensor. So we're measuring a bunch of physical dimensions. And then we compare those physical dimensions against a database of like 10,000 people that are from the area that the ride is in. And we say, okay, if their fingertips are this big and their palm width is like this, and their elbow to wrist dimension is this, they're probably 6'0". They're probably a male, and they're and they probably weigh, and then and so we try to embody you. So now whenever I look to my right and my child was there, I can still see him in VR. We've embodied him. So there is a character there that's representing my son, and they are approximately pretty close to the dimensions of my son. And whenever I wave, we've got sensors now picking up your hands and your elbows and your whole movement. So when I wave, he can see me waving. And when he waves back, I can see him waving. And so we're trying to start, because to your point, Matt, exactly, when you're experiencing this, you want to look over to your friend and be like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. And so we're trying to be able to do that, again, leveraging the technology to make that more meaningful than like random rider one over there that doesn't look like my wife, but it's supposed to be my wife. We're trying to embody her or my son or whoever to really look like those individuals now. And so again, baby steps towards really unlocking those truly social, personal moments.
Holy crap. That's the only thing I can think of from that. That is unbelievable what you're able to do, and be able to do it all in the interest of delivering that unbelievable experience to your guests or the guests of your clients. Mark, I feel like this time has flown by. I wish we could talk all day. I feel like we could keep going for hours and hours. So we'll have to schedule a part 2 at some point to keep the conversation going. But in the meantime, if people want to learn more about CAVU, if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our website's out there. So it's cavudw.com. So feel free to go there. My personal email is Mark, just my first name, MARK, cavudw.com. So feel free to drop me a line there. Also on LinkedIn and stuff. And you'll also find me at the same events that you guys are at. So ASTM and IAPA and AIMS and all those things. So if you ever see me, come up, say hello. Would love to chat.
Absolutely. Well, maybe our next conversation could be in person, at one of these events, and we'll just record that, and that'll be part 2. So
that would be
or
awesome.
on Midnight Ride.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, this has been a fascinating conversation, and really, really appreciate your time. And for everybody who's out there watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.